So Gary, as already mentioned, you went on holiday to America and you saw the Mississippi steam paddle wheelers, and that was your inspiration for creating these boats. Can you please give us some more detail on how you developed the idea?
Well, I'd been to New Orleans before, and I went back with the specific reason to look on the river, and I was on 3 different boats, the Mississippi Queen and others, and I was really struck by their beauty, of course. We had a great history here in Brisbane from paddle wheelers right up to Ipswich from the late 1820s and then the 1830s right through. In the 1860s, there were boats similar. There were American paddle wheelers, the passenger boats. They came over carrying gold miners for the Gympie Gold Rush and up to Charles Towers. And those 2 boats, the passenger boats that brought Americans over here, they stayed in Australia and went up and down the coastline from Sydney to Brisbane and up north. So there was a background of this structure of boats in Queensland. Anyway, we came back to Brisbane, and Brian Thompson had already been to New Orleans, and I already had a boat on the river. Some of you may remember Bonaparte's Afloat, and it was a very successful entertainment floating restaurant, and we needed a bigger boat, of course, because it was extremely popular. And Brian came up with the drawing of the paddle wheeler, but it was only 60 feet long, and the kitchen was not much bigger than a motel kitchen, which is almost negligible. And as we didn't want to cook up on shore, I asked him for a galley. I'll drop the word kitchen, the captain's here, and the new owner. And it is a galley, and we made a bigger galley and a much bigger galley again for the Kookaburra Queen 2. There would have been no Kookaburra Queen 2, only for Expo, and that's when we commissioned the second vessel. And this one, this stern wheeler, while the other one is a side wheeler, this one is the mighty, majestic boat. And I think Jim Kelly has done us all so proud, the owner now, who's brought the maintenance levels right up to scratch. And it's a wonderful effort. Thanks, Jim.
So not too long ago, Brisbane didn't pay much attention to the river, as already mentioned. What sort of difference do you think that not only World Expo 88 made to embracing river life, but also these boats?
Well, while Kookaburra 1 was a floating seafood restaurant moored at Expo and was extremely successful, this cruising boat was just as popular, and so many interstate and overseas people came on it, and people really noticed. I remember the very first day of opening of Expo, 30th of April, the contract had been to deliver it by the first day of Expo, and it certainly was. It came up the river, it had been booked for breakfast, and they came cruising right there, right up past Expo. Of course, everyone else was waiting for another queen to arrive, Queen Elizabeth. And I was on the lookout, of course. I was looking for the Kookaburra Queen too. And then it came up, and a few people around me noticed it was different. There was a stern wheeler, but I was quite excited anyway. And there were people cheering from there. And then, of course, the Queen arrived, and I think there were quite a number of people just by a riverbank, and by the riverbank it's the South Bank there, and it was received so well that year. It was Expo really did a lot for Brisbane, yes, and the Kookaburra Queen too was an essential part of it.
So not many Expo icons still remain in Brisbane, let alone Queensland. What role do you wish the Brisbane River to play in local and interstate tourism in future?
Well, talking of tourism, we've always had people connected with the Kookaburra Queen who know a lot about tourism. One of our very first managers was Shane O'Reilly. You've all heard of the O'Reillys from O'Reilly Mountains. Well, he's here today, and he was manager for me for a couple of years, and They've been with me for about 7 years or up. And they know a lot about tourism, and the Kookaburra Queen does very well with their people like you, Nadia. It wouldn't hurt to have a talk one day to Shane O'Reilly, because that's another icon of Queensland, the O'Reilly Mountains. But I think the river is, some people have called it a serpentine style. Yes, it's shaped like a serpent going right through to the mouth of the river. And it has such an important role. The Lucinda, the Queensland official boat, was a paddle wheeler, and that's where the future King George V signed the Australian Constitution, just outside in Moreton Bay. There's so much history that could be used towards tourism, and the river shapes up. Next time, as we go back, have a look at the Customs House. The Customs House was one of the first buildings that looked exactly the same to the river as it does to Queen Street. And it's a magnificent old building, it really is. But have a look at it, and the whole structure of it was drawn up by the Commonwealth architect, FDR Stanley, and he did it for that reason. He could envision then, in the 1860s, in the 1870s, how much the river would mean to Queensland, how much the river would mean to the capital city. And it's gradually happening. As someone said earlier, by the time Bonaparte's approach was on the river, it was still only 4%. And then with the Kookaburra Queens, it got up to about 35 to 40%. And then by now, it's over 60, maybe up towards 70%. And Brisbane residents, those who live in the suburb, they attract so many people to Queensland who don't fly to Queensland. They don't fly to Brisbane, they drive, or come by train or bus. And they're the ones who stay with the suburban people, their families and friends, and they're the ones who say, go aboard the Kookaburra Queen.
Well, thank you, Gary, for answering those questions. I've now